Chicago got a very special guest. Good morning again, Rick.
Good morning, and thank you, Carl. Yes, we do have an important guest in so many ways. Chairman Jeb Hensarling, Chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. Chairman, thank you for taking the time. I know how busy your schedule has been.
Happy to do it, Rick.
All right, listen, you were in the big chair yesterday listening to all the questions in the second day, what used to be referred to as Humphrey Hawkins, and I just want to put a little primer on this. You know, we're going into, what, 7th, 8th year where rates are pretty darn low. There was a time early on when the Fed was almost begging the government to get involved with some fiscal horsepower. Hence, I see markets have moved dramatically to the upside. The stock market doesn't necessarily need the Fed to hold it up on helium. Seems to be underpinnings investors like. So I ask you, Chairman, you were there yesterday. Is there any observations you would like to share with us, especially considering all the questions on regulation and this notion the Fed seems to be distancing itself from what it wanted the most now that it's arrived in the form of potential fiscal stimulus?
Well, I don't know, Rick. To some extent, going to these Humphrey Hawkins hearings is a little bit like Groundhog Day. I think one of the job requirements to be Fed chairman is to talk a lot and say very little, so I'm not sure a whole lot of light was shed. Unfortunately, what I didn't hear from Chair Yellen is any real plan to unwind this balance sheet that has represented this unconventional monetary policy. And after 8 years, there is zero evidence that zero interest rates and near zero interest rates have returned us to a healthy economy. And then what I was also disturbed to hear is that, notwithstanding the fact that we have a new administration and that the old administration never appointed a vice chair for supervision, that we still have our Fed essentially negotiating international agreements for our banks and our our financial institutions on their regulatory side. And that's separate and apart from their monetary policy side. That needs congressional supervision. They need to wait until President Trump appoints a vice chair for supervision to engage in those negotiations, because our economy, as you well know, in 2016, 1.6% economic growth, half of our potential, half of our historic record, and that's unacceptable in America.
Let me stop you right there, Chairman. You just nailed it. You know, all the questions about, oh, don't roll back regulations, don't raise rates too much, because these things aren't going to work. But in the end, what they've done has given us subpar growth. We need some change. Real quickly, on the runoff to the balance sheet, that was brought by Chair Yellen yesterday, even though she didn't give a timeline. That is a good place to start, is it not?
Well, I appreciate the commitment to unwind the balance sheet, but there was simply no plan. It's basically, I'll do it when I feel like doing it, and I'll recognize it when I recognize it. But we want a Federal Reserve that is dedicated to a monetary policy that is predictable, that is strategy-based and communicated
rules
to the American
people. Rules of the road, Chairman. Yes, we need somebody to write rules of the road. They can make it in color form with wax crayons, because it doesn't need to be that complicated. All right,
no.
Listen, Chairman, I'm holding a bill. S-370, brought by Mr. Cruz. It reads, to eliminate the Bureau of Consumer Protection by repealing Title X of Dodd-Frank, or Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, commonly known as the Consumer Financial Protection Act of 2010. Tell me about this bill, Chairman, and how it's going to proceed.
Well, the CFPB is a rogue agency. Number one, the second highest court in the land has ruled it unconstitutional. We would be derelict in our duty if we didn't do something about it. And Senator Cruz's plan is certainly a valid plan, and that is simply get rid of it and start over. One of the options we can look at is rolling our federal consumer protection enforcement into the Federal Trade Commission. There's a good argument it belongs there. There's another argument that says that perhaps it should go to the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, the FDIC, the Fed, our bank regulators. I'm not offended by having consumer financial protection in one agency, but not an agency that is unaccountable to the president, unaccountable to Congress, unaccountable to the courts, unaccountable to the American people. This is a rogue agency. We have set up basically a dictator. Now, some would argue he's a benevolent dictator, but no one person in America, particularly an unelected person, should have the power unilaterally to decide what cards go in our wallet, whether or not we can have a mortgage, and whether or not if we like our banker, we can keep her. And so this agency is just out of control since they have come on to the scene. Free checking at banks has been cut in half. Bank fees are going up. Many auto loans have increased $500. Credit cards, 200 basis points more, 15% less accessible. I could go on. This consumer agency is hurting consumers because it's damaging the most important consumer protection there is, and that is competitive, innovative, transparent markets that give Americans the freedom of choice. And so it has got to either be done away with, it's got to be functionally reformed and taken care of. It has to enforce the rules, not make up the rules. Today it is legislature, judge, jury, and that's got to stop. There are no checks and balances on this agency.
You know, Chairman, what a great place to end this discussion. Checks and balances. You know, I see Congress, I see the judicial branch. They all seem to be a lot more awake than they've been the last several years. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, Chairman. I sincerely hope that you will come back soon as you have updates on all the issues the House is dealing with. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly.
And thank you, Rick. When we come back, the CEO of U.S. Foods is with